Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my Inca Dorado series. This is going to be a rewind. There's a lot of talking to do. So, right up front, I just wanted to point out that rather than make you guys, have to sit through all the extended gameplay again, I recorded the gameplay for this segment and then decided to do the narration afterwards. And that way, for those of you who don't necessarily want to go through the gameplay again, which is understandable, you can just skip this altogether if you'd like after you hear my intro explanation. And that way also too, I can focus on the narration rather than the gameplay. The gameplay won't suffer because I'm focusing on the narration, etc., etc. Now, when I'm publishing a series, things like rebooting, starting over, going back, these are things I do not want to do. I think they potentially impact the integrity of the series, if not the channel. So, anytime even the thought of such a thing comes up, I weigh that with a very heavy heart. And for proof of that, this very series, I mean, a lot of people were talking about, oh, hanging gardens, hanging gardens. And it had occurred to me, oh, maybe go back and see what it's like, that kind of thing. Um, but I figured, no, we'll just talk it up to a learning experience, and in the future I can experiment with it, etc. But as time has gone on, more people are still saying, hey, you can still build hanging gardens, or maybe you could have, etc., etc. I thought I had addressed it. I thought it was a settled matter, but it's still coming up. So I figured, okay, I will step back in time and try it out. That way, those of you who wanted to see it, this series can be all that it can be. And those of you who don't, you can kind of have a side-by-side comparison. So I'll be learning from that. And for other people who might not, chase after wonders, kind of like myself, they can look at the side-by-side comparison as well. So there's a few differences in terms of the gameplay. Mostly I'm going to stay the same, but the few key differences, obviously, number one, I'm going to go for hanging gardens. Now, the way this was achieved, I reloaded my save at the end of part 4 because this was the save that was up until that point. I don't think there was any good time to build the hanging gardens. We were building infrastructure, etc., etc. And then what I did was I played it up until the point that you saw this video began, which would have been like right between the end of 4, right between the end of 5. So let's call it 4.5. And then I made a save game there, and then when I was able to, I loaded it up and recorded the footage you're watching now. That was after we had finished the tradition tree, so we do have the policy that helps to expedite wonders. All of our aqueducts are up, which also helps with wonders because you keep growing and growing and growing. And that was the moment I decided to try for the hanging gardens in the capital. So that's what we're doing. One of the things that got me reconsidering was people were talking about the growth, which I already understood the growth. I figured, early granary, civil service, 3 trade routes feeding the capital. I figured growth would be pretty good. But then it occurred to me if we had more growth, those extra citizens could start working our good production tiles in the capital sooner, which will, allow purchasing more, or I mean building more wonders, things like that. The second main difference in the gameplay, as you see here, after we took engineering for the purpose of having our aqueducts available as well as unlocking a 3rd trade route, we had gone to ironworking specifically so Olan could build the Colossus. And along that same vein, as you can see, technology-wise, after that, I went into optics. What this will mean is that Olan will be able to get its lighthouse up sooner than the initial series, which is going to be good. I should have done that anyways. But it also means we can try for the Great Lighthouse because, it's the exact same thing. Take a little quick jog to the side just to be able to build a wonder, take another quick jog to the side just to be able to build that wonder. And that's going to be nice because that means both of our coastal cities will have a little bit of a head start on their growth. Olan will get the lighthouse up sooner, and then, of course, assuming we can finish the Great Lighthouse, which we were able to before, having started later, so it's almost a shoo-in, right? But nevertheless, we'll have that growth up sooner, which is more science, etc., etc. So that's the second main difference in the gameplay. The third main difference in the gameplay is the pathing of the roads. Somebody had pointed out, hey, you're Inca, you could be building it across the roads, from Olan to Tijuan. Something I hadn't done in the initial series, and when I looked at that, I was like, they're totally right. I hadn't seen that. It was tunnel vision. So this time around, I decided to rectify that since I'm going back and, trying to make it more, appealing to the audience, more interactive, that kind of thing. I thought I'd give that a try. So you will see the workers, their cooperation, moving forward to be a little bit different than it was before. And then the only other gameplay difference that we're going to see, which I'm not even sure if it even came up during this segment or not. Oh, wait, no, there was one point in time where it did. And that is just a willingness to weave in shrines as a filler building here and there where possible. I think we come to a point where, because we're getting to the wonders earlier, I didn't need to favor stables. So T1 had like 3 turns before markets would be available, so I just had it build a shrine, if I'm not mistaken. And then the other comment somebody had made that changed my approach that I think can be seen during this segment is that somebody had pointed out that I could have bought a market at one point in the capital, and then it would kind of pay for itself over time. And because we're going for the hanging gardens, that increase of growth means we will have more population in general, which means we will be able to work the 2 tiles we have producing gold. The city's already, bringing in a good amount of gold even without those tiles. So I thought that was a good idea, purchase the market. In the main series, I had purchased a stable because we went with the stable first, and then the capital, that's 2, 3, 4 hammers, which is nice. But having built the hanging gardens first, we'll have the extra population. We have that hill iron, that's 4 hammers by itself. So that's another thing that we went a little differently on. As you can see, after optics was satisfied so we can get the great lighthouse started, the hanging gardens had 6 turns left. It would only take 5 turns to research philosophy, so that's when we went into philosophy. That would be the only downside to this rewind, is that the National College is going to come up a little later. But of course, in the meantime, our coastal cities are going to be growing a little bit earlier. And of course, we got the extra growth from hanging gardens in the capital. So in theory, that should, balance out before too long. And in fact, we'll blow by what the science would have been in the initial series. So anyways, that's basically my explanation of why there is a rewind. As you can see, the duration of the video is just under half an hour, so it's about the length of a regular episode, but it encompasses what would have been from 4.5 through 7. I think this segment ends at 90 on turn 98, and the main series was like 99, I think it was. It was like 1 turn off. Both of them left on the quote-unquote cliffhanger of enhancement beliefs and filler policy. I might as well comment on that now, even though we're not at that point. I'm trying to pay attention to the video footage here so that we can see all the decisions as far as tile assignments, is trying to keep track of growth. If it can speed things up, I shift it. If not, I'll work what I might otherwise consider suboptimal tiles. Anyways, since I had published the part 7, I did some research on the religion. That's part of the reason why I'm more willing to weave shrines in the early game, because that's going to come up. Well, I guess I'll get back to that in a second. But more importantly, religious community, the one that basically says gain a percentage of production in the city for every follower up to a cap of 15. From what I've gathered, that's like right almost on par with pagodas. Obviously, you might not necessarily want to choose that as your first, unless like pagodas and mosques were gone, that kind of thing. But it's right on par. So since that's available, I think that would be the good follower belief to take when enhancing our religion. Of course, again, let me know what you guys think. There's the Hanging Gardens. So that has been completed. We're now under the influence of the extra food, which we can see here is actually a 20% increase in our food. So not bad at all. Not bad at all. And it doesn't take long to start seeing the difference of being able to work our production tiles and get things done. And that's part of the reason why I think religious community also works out, and why Hanging Gardens in retrospect is very well worth it, because one of my concerns with chasing after the wonders is the opportunity cost, right? And this applies to both religious community and the fact that Hanging Gardens was built, and therefore we'll be able to work the production tiles a little bit better. It'll over time, in a way, it will pay for itself. And another thing I had failed to consider is that in the main series, there would have come a point in time where I would have wanted to build a garden, but now the garden's already built, which means, you know, when we get our specialist, we'll be at the 25% rate right away. I won't have to take the time to build that. So I'm really learning a lot from this experience. So I want to thank you guys once again, because now this presents for me a new dimension of the game, because after having, you know, gone the Liberty way for so long and then dabbling in honor successfully, coming back to tradition, I am really liking what I'm seeing in tradition. And I know I'm not telling you guys things you don't already know. That's, you know, even after the patch that kind of made legalism come later, everybody knows tradition is, you know, above and beyond. Almost always going to be the best opener at the very least, if not opening tree to complete. Both early, mid, and late game, there's a lot of advantages. But now I'll have the added facet of trying to decide, like this series, taking a tech just for the wonder that it unlocks. I've never done anything like that before. I'm either looking at the long game or what my workers would want to do, or the common buildings, the non-wonder buildings. So yeah, it's pretty exciting for me. It's not something I wanted to do. I did not want to do a rewind. I wanted to just stick with it, you know, make my mistakes, let it ride, that kind of thing. But it kept coming up in the comments, so I wanted to, you know, do this for those who really wanted to see it. And I realized maybe they didn't mean necessarily go back, but here we are. And another thing I'm noticing is that Raging Barbarians, you know, comes up once again. In this particular map, we kind of got lucky because we were backed into a corner on the coast. We got our cities down, so the Raging Barbarians has largely been not a factor in our game, at least not for a while now. But meanwhile, as we're traveling, you know, the world, we're seeing that it's really harming the other civilizations. In fact, later on in this segment, I'm faced with the decision to trade a luxury with Washington, and I think it was gems and wine. And originally I was just going to go with gems because I looked at the timeline, and gems would have been a little more spaced out. And I like to get those things kind of spaced out so that if something happens, you know, we get them back and stuff like that. But I had noticed that the wine was something I was trading to Pakal. And any way you slice it, Pakal's getting ravaged from all sides by barbarians. So I don't know. At some point in time, that trade could just have been dissolved, right? Because if they, you know, pillage his last, I think it was salt, we would just lose our deal and get our wine back. So I guess my point is the Raging Barbarians has an effect on the game that seems to be limiting what my opponents are capable of. So I kind of have mixed feelings about that, because if I'm going to try to learn how to play tradition and decide, you know, which text to go to open up wonders, which wonders to pursue, that kind of thing. My opponents are going to kind of artificially be held back to some extent, not all. Like, near as I can tell, Poland's been fine. Portugal, based on where their layout is and our visibility, they've probably been relatively fine. Maybe it's as a result of sharing a border with us. I don't know, but that is a factor for me to consider moving forward. I turned on Raging Barbarians because when I first, somebody had told me about it during the China series, I think it was. I was like, oh man, it would have been so nice for Honor to be so much more relevant and stuff. And I tried it with the Germany because, it's suited, Germany suited to more barbarian camps, obviously. And it was a lot of fun. But even in that scenario, as time goes on, more cities get planted, civilizations are building more units, so there's just more visibility throughout the world. It always is going to slow down. So I have my reservations about Honor in the future, and I really like the tree. I just don't know how realistic it is, obviously. So in the future, I'm considering whether or not to turn Raging Barbarians back off. So let me know what you guys think as far as that goes. Another thing I was thinking in terms of the series, for those of you who are still hanging around, was quick speed. I did a glance, and I'm thinking that I probably wouldn't like it as much. With the eras going by quicker, units just aren't as relevant, and old me would have loved that idea, but I wanted to try and do a better job at learning how to work with units, when to build them, how to, because especially even with tradition, it's not going to be hard to get to a point where the production in every city is such that you could just take the time to build a few units, go to war, take a good city, or whatever. Like Passer Gade in the German series was a really good city that would have been worth taking, even if we weren't going domination. So I don't know if I want to take a route that would make units less relevant. And from what I've seen, for every person that might say, oh, this is taking too long, or something to that effect, there's that many more people that are saying, oh, I like that it's taking longer, I like that they span more time, I like it when they're longer, I like it when you go into more depth. So anyways, it's just something I'm considering, so let me know what you guys think. As for the video, you can see we're underway with the road from Olan to T1. You can see that scout ran into some problems with the barbarian horse. Luckily, he landed on a hill, so he's been able, and the horse was, hopping over the river, so I was able to hill 30 between every hit. That was pretty crucial, and being on the hill, the added defense. So eventually the horse was just, no longer a factor. It was just a problem because Pakal didn't have, open borders available, so I kind of had to wait for civil service to come online to be able to trade for that, which was unfortunate. But, the scout weathered the storm and ends up getting the scouting promotion as a result, so definitely could have been worse. The timing of the finishing of Olan's second sheep, as well as the borders growing to encompass the gold, I don't know if you noticed because I was talking a lot, but it actually lent itself pretty well for the workers to cooperate. Not Rhodey was getting some pre-builds going on the hills before hopping off to do the gold, which allows Rhodey to come in behind, do the last of the pre-builds, and then finish the road and retrace his steps, kind of thing. So overall, everything's working out smoothly. There we go. National College is up. It's turned 93. It was a bit of a delay, but it was for the sake of Hanging Gardens. So again, I do think that's going to pay off in the end. I think ultimately here I do still go with the Writers Guild, because even though I'll benefit from having those heavy production tiles in the mix, the city's just growing and growing and growing. It now has Hanging Gardens. It's got 3 city-states bearing down on it. We have some mercantile city-states under our wings. So the capital's getting a lot of food anyways, and I anticipate those citizens will be placed earlier rather than later. One thing you may have noticed is that I'm not focusing as much on T1's for food tiles, and the reason for that is because with the hanging gardens in the capital, especially once the Writers Guild is populated and all that culture means the borders are going to grow faster and faster, I thought it was more important to have two workers, working on the capital, because just like before, we have to buy into some extra river plains, around the time of civil service, things like that. And then the guy who's working on the gold will pick up the slack in T1 after that, since he'll be right there. And we'll see how that goes, because obviously I do want that city to grow. There is going to come, it's got, especially once with those river hills that we can build terrace farms on.
Good day.
Come civil service, that city's got a lot of tiles that are going to be worth working. And unfortunately, once we get
proceed.
Here's where I think to trade the wine instead, just in case Pakal gets blown up.
Good day. I'm listening.
Lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, the tile assignment. Come university, in my experience, the jungle cities tend to dip real deep in terms of production. Because they're suddenly got to work jungle tiles, which have no hammers. They got to put specialists into the university itself. So there will come a point in time where T1's production dips real far, and we'll have a lot of food tiles available to us. So it'll be a high growth, low production city until such a time that growth repopulates all those tiles. And as time goes on, you'll have even more and more specialist slots. So that might just be a city where we do strictly stick to the science specialist slots until like secularism or something that would make it more worthwhile. And there we go. The Writers Guild is up. Again, we'll keep a close eye on how our policy and science line up so that we can have Renaissance open before the next policy, or not the next policy, but the policy after the next policy. That's something we're going to aim for. Because if at all possible, getting into Renaissance by way of astronomy would be amazing, because then we could go straight into observatories in our two coastal cities that also happen to be our two mountain cities. So there's that. Anyways, that's pretty much it. It's everything else is just the gameplay. Obviously, because of the change in builds and decisions and stuff like that, there's different deals and city-states want different things. So there is going to be some variety in the series moving forward. But this segment here does pretty much finish everything. That here we go, hit civil service. We're going to try for Chichen Itza. Just testing things out as far as timing of growth. And with the market, I was trying to favor the gold tiles, but it looks like I had a lapse of judgment. There was a point earlier, though, where you may have seen me wrestling with tile assignment, and I ended up going with the gold tile just because it had some gold per turn on it. Yep, and just like before, just buying our way into that, chopping down the forest, getting the production boost, putting down the Terrence farms. I did rename the one worker Terrence again, and Rhodey, of course, I renamed Rhodey. So there I have to, every time we jump up to around 10, or, at one point I think we were up to 18, we got to look at our city-states and how fast they're going to decay and when we're going to lose that. So there was one point where I think we're at like around 10 and could have sold off a luxury, and I was like, no, this one's going to be fleeting. I think at one point we had 3 city-states that were allies, and it basically came down to 2 of them were going to disappear right away. 5 to 7 turns, I think it was, and the other one was going to stick around for like 20 or 25 turns. So in a situation like that, obviously I treat the one that's going to be around for 20, 25 turns as if I could sell off my luxury, um, and then count on that extra happiness still being there from the city state. But the ones that are going to decay pretty quickly, you don't want to count that as part of your happiness, even though in the short term it is. Hopefully that made sense. That's one thing I don't like about narrating after the fact, is it's a lot easier for me to explain things when I've got a mouse pointer and can point to exactly what it is I'm talking about. I'm one of those people that in person, my arms are moving to kind of like diagram what it is I'm saying. Okay, and another thing you might have noticed that was different is because we built the Great Lighthouse earlier, because we teched for it earlier, we only got one trireme running around. Also, since I went for the Hanging Gardens, we only built, was it one or two? Well, I guess I could look there. Two composite bowmen instead of, like, I think it was four in the initial series. So Sidon gave us a catapult, which is unfortunate because it's not particularly useful, but we can garrison it in Olan, and that way if something happens it gets attacked. But as you saw, we've already been approached by Casimir to be friends, so there you go. Alright, somehow, some way we managed to hit these crucial turning points in the decision making on turn 98. I'm pretty sure in the original series it was turn 99. So I'm not sure how that discrepancy came up, but we're in the exact same boat. So I just wanted to point out, because I don't think I got to it earlier, that somebody had mentioned that if you open up the commerce tree, you'll increase your gold, obviously, which allows you to buy more buildings, which allows your cities to focus more on building wonders. And I think that's very attractive. I think my patronage idea from earlier was also a good idea, but because if you buy your city states, they can provide food in the in the cities, or extra culture or whatever. So let me know what you guys think. I'm now leaning more towards economic. For commerce. Yeah, I'm now leaning more towards commerce, but I understand patronage. One person had made a comment that was very compelling for patronage, but I think that has to do with later in the game when we can fill it out a bit more. Here you can see religious community is available. That's what I'm heavily leaning towards in religious texts. But let me know what you guys think. Anyways, thank you so much for your patience with this setup. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.